Today I'm talking about the Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. I've been able to shoot with this camera for a little while now, and I just really want to give you my honest opinions of it, who I think it's good for, what situations I think it's good for, and what situations I think it might be bad for. So I just want to jump into the things that I really enjoy about this camera. Let's start with the name, 6K. It can shoot 6K file sizes, or 6K resolution. Now with 6K resolution, it gives you a lot of options for things like punching in on an image. You know, if you're doing an interview and you want it to kind of look like you've changed shots, you can punch in on it. You can reframe, push the image left or right, up or down a little bit if you want to get that framing a little bit better. It gives you a lot of more latitude to work with in green screening or in VFX rather. The more pixels the better for rotoscoping, doing things like that. The higher resolutions also gives you the ability to oversample and then downscale. So you shoot at 6K, you can downscale it to 4K, 1080, and it gives you that cleaner looking image. It can kind of mitigate any kind of artifacts, any kind of noise that you had at 6K. Also, if you're shooting in 6K and you've got kind of wobbly footage, you can kind of stabilize that footage. Again, if you're kind of downsampling it, it's easier to stabilize it because when you've got that wobbly image, you're kind of focusing in more on the center and cropping out the edges that are wobbling, going up and down. So it gives you that option. The final thing that you can do is you can take a still image from your frames, your 24 frames a second, and use that for a poster. Use that as a really high quality photo to post online and kind of get buzz going for your film, which I think is incredible. You know, it makes you look really professional, really established. You've got these great images coming out for this project that you're doing. Let's also talk about the sensor. I love that this has a larger sensor than the sister camera here, the Micro Four Thirds censored 4K, Pocket 4K camera. So we got the larger sensor here, gives us that larger field of view. I've primarily shot with the GH5 and also with the Pocket 4K. One big drawback to me is that narrowed field of view that you get with a Micro Four Thirds and a cropped, typically a 2x crop factor. It can just be a pain sometimes if you're in a physical space where you cannot back the camera up anymore, but you want to get that wider shot and you just really don't have that choice. This gives you kind of a more wider ability to shoot. Also, with this camera, I love the fact that you can shoot with the Canon EF lenses. I used to shoot on Canon a lot. A lot of peers of mine shot on Canons. A lot of us have moved over to different cameras and still kept these lenses though. So with EF mount, there's just this abundance of lenses out there to borrow, to use, and it's really made for an easy transition into a camera like this. Like right now, I've got the Sigma Art 18 to 35 on this camera, and that coupled with the fact that this camera can shoot high resolutions, that this camera has incredible color science, has the incredible Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve software behind it. So all these things combine together and make for you to have just this ability to make these really stunning looking visuals. So I've talked about the sensor, your lens options here with the EF mount, the high resolutions. I'll talk more about the stunning images that you can get. I've always loved the images that Blackmagic Design can create. Their color science has always been amazing, and I've always just loved their focus on being able to color grade with their flat film profile, with the DaVinci Resolve software that is highly geared towards color grading, with their cameras that shoot at these dynamic ranges that are very wide. This camera has 13 stops of dynamic range. And all these things, again, combined together, you can create these amazing images. I often struggle when using DSLRs, other cameras, that I'm doing everything right in camera. I'm doing everything I can, but just the power isn't there. The whole system isn't pulled together enough to be able to really push the image the way you want it to. These cameras are really geared towards that. And that's the big selling point. That's the big benefit to me for these cameras. Now, the big drawback for these cameras to me is kind of the flip side of that, is if you're If you're more of a run and gun type, you're more flippant about the shots you get, this camera is really not good for that. I mean, to really get this camera going, we'll talk about this other negative here, is how you have to kind of rig it out. To really get this camera going, you have to rig it out. And running and gunning with it is just a lot more challenging. You physically have this bulky, cumbersome rig here. You know, you've got things to worry about, your battery power, just the overall, like how much battery you have left. If you're just shooting with the Canon LP batteries that go into it. If you do have it rigged out, you've got this very weighted rig here. You've got all these extraneous things coming out of the camera. You know, we're recording to an external hard drive. I think most people are doing that because the CFast cards are just too expensive comparatively for, you know, the gigabytes that you can get. You know, you've got the external monitor because this screen is kind of, it doesn't tilt or anything. It's not very flexible in that way. So it can just be hard to be kind of a nimble shooting crew. And, you know, other cameras offer that, but at the expense of having this beautiful, artful image. So it's just kind of a choice you have to make. I'll talk more about some of the other things that I really enjoy about this camera, or at least back to the image processing, which again is really the best part of this. With this camera, you've got Blackmagic RAW. Again, this is Blackmagic's designed codec and quality standard that is geared towards giving you this quality image and kind of saving space for you, or saving processing power on your computer. These files don't struggle as much as my computers in the past have struggled with Cinema DNG files, with much lower resolution H.265 files. Those files would slow my computer down like nothing else, and they would just be 1080 files. This thing can shoot 6K and 4K in this elegant codec and quality that just works well with a computer. In this BRAW, we can shoot all these different compression rates too, so you can be mindful of your compression of your file sizes. You've got 3:1, so that's high quality. You can go 5:1, 8:1, 12:1, that's lower quality. Still good looking images, just a little bit more compressed. If you really want to control your quality, you can have constant quality on, and that gives you options for Q0 and Q5. Q5 is a little bit more compressed. Q0 is this really high quality, continuous, constant quality assured, because you have the constant quality with the Q0, Q5, and you have the constant bit rate. You can also shoot at ProRes. That's another great codec. But one drawback here is it limits the choices, the resolution choices for you to shoot with. If you're shooting in ProRes, you can only shoot in 1080 HD or 4K. You can shoot in the Ultra HD 3840 2160 or the 4K DCI 4096 by 2160. On the flip side of that, you're shooting in BRAW. You can't shoot in those. You cannot shoot in 4K or in HD. You can shoot in things kind of around those. You can shoot in 2.8K. You can shoot in 5.7K. So it's kind of weird to me, in a way. It's, again, I don't think it's as forgiving or as accommodating to a run and gun shooter, or maybe more of a YouTube kind of shooter. Somebody that is okay with getting the lower resolution size footage. This camera isn't really geared toward that. It's kind of pushing you more towards the shooting in the RAW, shooting in the higher resolutions. So that's something you got to be mindful of. Are you going to be this shooter that's creating these beautiful images that are a little bit harder to get? Or are you going to be running around, with your camera freehand kind of thing? That's really the balance, the choice that you have to make. Again, about running around freehand or running around in general with this, you're going to have to get a pretty beefy stabilization system that holds this camera. A common gimbal like, I don't know, the Phaotech, I don't think they would really hold up. They certainly wouldn't hold up this rig. It's probably pretty hard to put this camera on one of those type gimbals too, because it's wide. Those gimbals aren't really meant for cameras that are so wide. They're pretty much tailored towards more the DSLRs. So again, are you going to be the studio shooter, locking the camera down, or having this really impressive setup to get these beautiful images, or do you be one of a more of a rebellious shooter? I keep saying run and gun, but I'm trying to think of some other words to describe that type of shooter. So it's your choice. Let's go into some other options here. Frame rate. I'm back and forth with the frame rate and the slow-mo shooting that this camera has. I find it interesting that you can shoot 120 frames a second at 2.8K. I think that's pretty incredible. I've never, certainly with a camera this price, I've never been able to shoot anywhere near that resolution and at that high of a frame rate. So I think that's pretty cool. However, oftentimes if I'm shooting something in a high frame rate, I'm okay with shooting it in 1080. Maybe it's just because I'm used to shooting at that resolution and achieving those higher frame rates. But for me, oftentimes, if I want slow motion, if I want to shoot at this high frame rate, I'm going to sacrifice the resolution just so I can get the slowest motion possible. With this camera, that's kind of not really factored in, at least with the firmware we have right now. With B-RAW and at 2.8K, you can shoot 120 frames a second. Now we switch it to ProRes, we switch it to 1080. You'd think we could shoot higher than that. Right now, with this camera setup, unless I'm doing something incredibly wrong, which I don't think I'm doing, I can only shoot up to 50 frames a second in HD. And like I'm playing with it right now. You would figure at the lower resolution, I would be able to shoot at a higher frame rate, but I don't have that available to me right now. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. Maybe it's the media I'm recording to. Maybe it cannot do it to the external drive. I'm not sure though. I haven't seen anything written about that. So it's just strange to me. But I'll get off this topic. Let me see. One more try. No, I can't figure it out. I always get hung up on it. That kind of leads me to a similar drawback that I have, again, with high frame rate shooting, is I kind of find the high frame rate shooting a little bit confusing. Each resolution kind of has their own parameters on what frame rate you can shoot at, things like that. So it just is confusing. It's hard for me to remember. And it leads me to often, if I'm wanting to shoot at higher frame rates, I'm standing here playing with the display, just trying to figure out trial and error. Will this work at that frame rate? Will this frame rate work with this codec, this resolution? And it just makes for kind of a time-consuming process. So I think I'm going to do a whole video on slow motioning with this camera because I think it needs to be broken down and explained. And hopefully I can do it and there's not a firmware update or something that just totally changes all this, because I want it to be a resource for everybody to use. And I hope that the camera is doing the best that it can already. I hope they're not like stalling with better features to come out as the time goes on, but we'll see. Let's see, I'll scroll through some of the, we can shoot time-lapse with this camera. I think that's a cool option. It's very easy to shoot time-lapse as well. You just toggle on the time-lapse function and then kind of set however often that you want to take a frame. So pretty cool in my opinion. Tons of monitoring options, peaking, display LUTs, zebras, all that. They give you all the stuff you need, and it's very easy to add or remove from the screen. Let's see here. You can set some custom function buttons. Again, I think that's awesome. You can set custom presets for your camera configuration in general, and you can load up various LUTs into this camera. Your own LUTs, they have a couple of LUTs programmed in. You can bake those LUTs into the footage that you're delivering, or you can just view that LUT on the monitor, but not actually export it or not actually have it baked into your footage. Just kind of gives you an idea of what it will look like if you're adding this color grade to it later on. So I've always appreciated that about these cameras. Another drawback, though, that I would say about this camera, if we're getting out of the menu, is I don't like the autofocus. I hope that there will be better changes to the autofocus, or really just the focus in general. Like, it doesn't have much of an autofocus. It's you tap it, it focuses. If you want it to focus again, if you've moved to a different subject or the subject's moved away, you got to tap the focus button again, get it to focus again. So again, leading back to the scenario I was drawing, where if you're more of a run and gun person or a one-man band type, you want the autofocus. You want to be able to chase your subject around and know that it's going to be in focus, and the camera's doing that for you. This camera, this is more of a camera for the team. You want a focus puller. You want somebody monitoring, monitoring the external display or the wireless display, pulling that focus. That's the best way to ensure what you'll be getting. And that's the more professional way to do it. That's the higher budget cruise way to do it. So again, it's the choice you make. What kind of shooter are you? I mean, if you are in a scenario where you have the focus puller, all this other gear to support this camera, you might have other cameras at your disposal. So you kind of just want to be in the right place to get this camera, is what I'm saying. And if you're someone that just wants to throw this on a rig and follow your subject around, be more haphazard, this camera is really not geared toward that. But overall, yeah, I think the Blackmagic design camera, the Pocket Cinema camera here, is just a great achievement in continually moving high quality, cinema quality capabilities and tools to the indie lower budget shooters. So it fills that gap for me. I can't wait to see what cameras that Blackmagic comes out with next. I can't wait to see what cameras the competition comes out with next, because this camera and the 4K camera are really pushing all the other cameras to step up their game as well. So it's a great time to be a video shooter, a content creator. Yeah, great time to make movies, but I think it always is. As long as you have a camera and an ability to shoot, it's a great time. Great time to make movies. So if you enjoyed this review, if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to my channel. I would love it if you could. If there's anything that I've missed on this camera, anything that you love and that I seem to hate on the camera, or vice versa, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to cover more stuff about this camera, if maybe I skipped anything over, anything like that. But I appreciate you guys for watching. Hope this was helpful in your choice to buy this camera, or your choice to understand what kind of shooter you want to be. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.